So welcome to the second session of Be the Founder. We're so glad to see everyone's faces back here today. Again, we have different types of numbers of people who are joining the session. Some people will be watching virtually on our streaming on YouTube, but also going to be in the call today. So let's just recap quickly on the next slide of what we discussed in last week's session last Saturday. So Session 1, we had guest speaker Bethany Starlin from the Ohio FFA Association come talk to us about communication styles and ideation development. We also talked about what does this program entail and kind of some of the requirements. So remember, in order to compete in the pitch competition, we were trying to attend 3 out of the 4 sessions. Each one is really unique and special, so we suggest that you come to all of them. But of course, we have opportunities for you to watch the recorded sessions again in preparation for the pitch competition, which I think is the most exciting part of the Be the Founder program, and we are so excited to be developing that. So without further ado, I'm going to give one more, sorry. On the next session today, first of all, we'll hear from Dr. Gene Poor, our guest speaker, and then we're also going to, after he's done speaking, take a look at 2 worksheets that we just emailed you and put on Google Classroom. So that's customer discovery and market analysis. And this is kind of the time that you get to go into the field and discover your customers, whether you already have a customer base, trying to expand that and understand the specifics of it, or trying to develop that and what that might look like in our area. And then I will end our session talking about branding, how do we create a name for ourselves in our community, and kind of just ending it on a really positive and fun note and giving you guys some resources to be successful. So without further ado, I welcome Dr. Gene Poor. Would you mind giving everyone a little bit about an introduction of you and your work in Northwest Ohio?
Yeah, I'm on, right? This is all a different experience for me. I'm a classroom guy, and so Zoom is, this is my first time I've ever doing an experience like this. I've been a serial entrepreneur my whole life, and I'm probably best known for the guy who started a company in Bowling Green called Life Formations. And you never know what's going to happen when you start a business like that. Everybody was going, you're going to build lifelike robots for Disney in Bowling Green, Ohio. Wouldn't you do that in California or do that in Florida? Wouldn't that be the place to go? And as it turned out, it was a perfect place to be in Bowling Green because we could draw from talent that people didn't even know existed. And so what I want to do, I want to start this a little differently. I want to do my welcoming that I usually do when I'm in front of students is that I congratulate you for winning the lottery. And you're maybe scratching your head going, what's that about? And it's about being the genetic lottery. The chance of being born are, I'm told, 130 to the 27th power. That's 130 with 27 zeros behind it. And so you got a chance to walk on the planet. And it's your life to really do whatever you want to do with it. And being an entrepreneur, I've never had a job. It's only work if you'd rather be someplace else. And I never really wanted to be anyplace else. I got to do what I wanted to do in my life, and people paid me to do it. And that's all I have ever wanted from my students that I have, is to think about what is it that you want to do and that you dream about doing, that you would do for nothing, but people end up paying you to do it. And so never having a job is a perfect thing to do. And then I say, how many people do you know that do for a living what they love to do and people paying them to do it? And maybe 2 or 3 hands out of 300 that I'm in front of every semester will raise their hand and say that they can name 1 or 2 or 3, but not many more can go any further than that. And so it's interesting to see how very few people in life get to really do their dream jobs. And they end up working on somebody else's dream. And that's the furthest thing that I wanted to happen in my life, because I think being an entrepreneur is more than just starting a business. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of making your life different, being the thing that you wanted to make it be. You know, here's what I hear about kids. And I've been hearing it for the last 10 years, and it doesn't change, is that 80% of you want to be rich and 50% of you want to be famous. And actually, I wanted to be both of those things in my life. I mean, somehow. And, you know, in the name like poor, kids will always come to me and go, well, how do you become rich? And I know the answer to that. And it's a simple answer, is that if you analyze rich people, they all own a business. And it's as simple as that. They're working on their dream and building off of that dream. And then they'll say, well, how do you become famous? And I go, well, I know how to do that as well. Famous people, they have people who are publicists and agents and managers and people who do nothing but just present them to the world. And most people will just put out a resume and go, this is who I am. Famous people have people working on them, telling the world how great they are. And so with those two things in mind, you know, entrepreneurs have to do both of those kinds of things. They have to start the business and then they have to promote it. One of the things, if you ever talk to any of the students that get to know me, I'm known for a statement, and the statement isn't mine. It belongs to a number of different people. I used to say, you as a human being walking on the planet, you're a little bit of everybody you ever loved. And so if you look around all the people that are influencing your life, you can see little bits and pieces of how they all fit into how you developed your personality. Well, Jim Rule had a better line than you're a little bit of everybody you ever loved. His line was, you're the average of 5 people that you run around with. So the interesting thing about rich people is that they run around with rich people. Famous people run around with famous people. It works. It's not only has to do with students. If you look at your friends, you can get a pretty good idea of who you are and what your value system is about. But it's also true about your parents. Look at it, you want to go home and take a look at your mom and dad. They run around with the same kind of people who have the same kind of jobs, the same kind of cars, the same kind of homes. They send their kids to the same kind of schools. It's about all of us. We all do the same thing. We run around with people who are like us. And so my recommendation is, if you want to be an entrepreneur, run with entrepreneurs. One of my messages for you today is a simple one. Put a mentor in your life. Put an entrepreneur in your life. It'll change everything. It all of a sudden, you just take on a completely different personality when you put people in your life. I wouldn't even be here today if it weren't for mentors that I had starting when I got to college. I kind of, you know, if you look, I'm absolutely, I'm completely out of my direction that I had when I was in high school. Because my mom and dad divorced, my grandparents, they had never gone to college. In fact, I was a first generation college student, and I had no intentions of going to college. It was because my dad had a business and I could work for him, and I did from the time I was 16 on. And so I graduated like on a Sunday. I went to work for my dad on a Monday, and he fired me on a Tuesday. And so now all of a sudden, I wasn't prepared to go to college, but I also didn't have a job. And so 2 teachers saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And they said, we think you ought to go to college. And I'm going, I don't know anything about it. And so these were the first two mentors that were in my life. These two teachers absolutely enrolled me, picked out the school, helped me decide what I wanted to become. And then when I got to college and I went to Kent, then I knew that I had to have somebody in my life help me when it was there, because I had no idea what that was going to be like. And so again, I put a prof in my life and he became a mentor. And he ultimately became my best friend. I did his retirement and I did his eulogy when he passed away. And so my message to students is always have mentors. And I've had mentors and heroes in my life the entire time that I've been an entrepreneur. Each movement that I made from business to business involved people who could help me get where I wanted to go. Now they weren't always, I've said that, I've never had a job. I've had a fantasy life. I got to do all the things that I wanted to do. Well, one of the things is that people say, well, didn't you ever have a bad day? Didn't you ever have a bad decision? And the answer to that was, sure. But I've had bad days at Cedar Point. I mean, one of the businesses that I started in Northwest Ohio was a restaurant. And I don't like to, I love to eat in restaurants. In fact, I always think eating it requires too much work to prepare the food. Then you have to eat the food, and then you have to finish and clean it all up. I'd rather eat in a restaurant every day of my life. And I thought, well, if you'd like to eat in restaurants, owning a restaurant would be perfect. So I designed and built a restaurant that still exists in Bowling Green called Easy Street. It's been there since I started it in '78, and it made it through COVID. And so the mistake was eating in a restaurant and owning a restaurant are not the same thing. So my fantasy of doing that was not the reality. And, owning a restaurant and eating in a restaurant, two separate things. I knew how to build it. I knew how to design it. I knew how to create it, but I didn't want to run it. And that's exactly what happened to me. So there was 4 or 5 years in there that were dreadful years, but I still grew and I still learned and I still developed. And I knew that my next business, I was never going to be held hostage. And that's when I was being held hostage because, everybody that worked at the restaurant said, well, Poor doesn't really know how to bartend. He really doesn't know how to wait on tables. He probably doesn't even know how to wash dishes. He can't, he doesn't have any flexibility in that situation. And so I knew that the next business that I was going to get into, I knew I wanted all the qualities that were going to be required, I wanted to have. And then I was going to go out and find people who would then be smarter than me and then augment those qualities. And so, but even in the restaurant, I had a mentor that kind of guided me through the process. And just, so, it's that line of putting the right people in your life, that message is what I carry to a lot of people. I go, come up with a great idea, and you're not really creating a business. You're creating a customer. And that's so important. When you think back what you're working on, think in terms of, does anybody really want this? Is it already out there? That doesn't mean you can't improve it and make it better, but you need to really analyze it from the standpoint of, are there customers out there that want this? And luckily, the businesses that I've created, that there was a customer base out there. Sometimes in the restaurant business, there's a large customer base, and I thought that the margins and profits were small. So when I looked back at the restaurant, the margins were always nickels, dimes, quarters, dollars, very small. But the audience base, the customer base, the ability to make it different and better so that customers would come to it, the potential of that was bigger. When I got into the robot business, now the customer base is small. Now you're looking at Universal Studios, Dollywood, Disney, Cedar Point. Anybody that buys that kind of product are very small, but the margins are huge. And I really, that makes me a lot happier. I mean, when you've got one, margin, I teach the class about entrepreneurship driven by margin. We look at margin as being, that's the foundation of a product and taking it along, which I'm hoping all of the kids that are involved in this program, I hope that all of you are addicted to Shark Tank. I mean, it's a perfect metaphor for you to have the opportunity to see what other people's ideas are and have them go in front of investors and let the investors take after them and say, what's the margin? What are you selling it for? How much is that? And what are you making it for? One of the first things they're going to ask. Then the second thing they're going to ask is, how much are you willing to give away? And I always tell all the kids that are in my class that are just beginning in their journey into the entrepreneurship, how much do you want to give away? And a lot of them will say, we don't want to give anything away. So I say, well, right now, then you own 100% of nothing. Congratulations. So what you've got to think about is, how much of it do you want to give away? And then, all of you, if you've watched that show and you learn about that, how much equity are you willing to give away? You don't want to give up more than 51%. I mean, 51% is what you want to hold on to so that you have control over it. So you see this tug of war take place of, how much are you willing to give to them to be able to still say that this is your dream and that you've got control. So that margin. Then I always point out, this is the perfect product for an entrepreneur to look at. Water. Can you imagine? My dad was in the beverage business, and he had a line about beverages. He would say, water, a great drink, but who would buy it? Now, my dad's passed away, but I'm sure that he's spinning in his grave going, people buy this? The cap is more valuable than what the product is. The bottle, the label is costs more than what the product. In fact, somebody did a study on USA Today and said, if you bought a bottle of water for $2, you could fill this bottle 7,000 times up with tap water, and the product, you still wouldn't have, the margin is not great. It's unbelievable. So, that whole world of business is fascinating. One of the things that I thought I would talk about a little bit is about ideas. I have this philosophy that the first 1,000 ideas that you come up with are just your beginnings. They're going to take you someplace, but you really need to think about, what are you passionate about? What is it that if I could know all of you, you each know something that nobody else in that group knows. And that's the beginning of understanding what an expertise is. And I think the best beginning for a product is to start working on something that you know about, that you understand. If you've looked at any of the writings that I've done, that's one of my top 10 rules, is do what you know, is that you understand the basics of it. And then the second thing I would want you to find out is, are there any customers for it? Again, that whole notion of not starting a business, but looking at a customer. And then I talk about how you're going to position yourself in that particular business. Are you going to position yourself as selling price? Are you going to be the most expensive, or are you going to be the cheapest, or where are you going to be in that price line in terms of? I was told that 5 guys didn't come to Bowling Green. They had signed a contract. They had talked about opening up one of their units in the Bowling Green, but they wouldn't come because their price point was too high. And so at the last minute, they pulled out and said, no, the customer base won't sustain us, especially during the summers. So the first thing, consideration in positioning yourself is about price. And the beginning entrepreneurs typically, and I fell into this in the beginning, is that we'll be the most inexpensive. And there's a name for us that do that. We're bottom feeders. You know, we're looking at that group that's shopping for best price, not a comfortable position to be in. And I did that in the animatronics world. I started as being the lowest priced, but simply over the years, I found that Disney's not looking for a low price. Disney's looking for quality, which is the second question. You know, where are you going to position yourself with price? How are you going to position yourself as quality? And then the third one is, what kind of service are you going to offer? Now, you can't have the best price, the best quality, and the best service. It's impossible. The logistics of being in business won't allow you to do all 3. You can do 2, but you can't do all 3. And so it's kind of like the electric car world. You know, you can go far, you can go cheap, but you're not going to go very fast. Pick 2: fast, speed, quality, and well, the same analogy. You know, price, quality, and service. Price, quality, and service. How are you going to position yourself in that particular world? And keep in mind, just because, you know, the first things that I would do when I have my students is, you come up with an idea, Google it, see if it's out there already. And then second of all, go out and do a Google patent search, see if it's got a patent hanging on it. And it doesn't make any difference if it already exists and it's patented, because you probably find your way around it to make yours unique enough that you can get around and the patent works that are out there. But first of all, find out what's going on out there already. Customer is, if it already exists, that means that there's a customer base out there that you can work your way into it. Look at Apple, for instance. Nothing Apple has ever done has been totally original. You know, you take a look at their entire product line, and it's already been done somewhere. I used the example of iPod, and my son had a Rio 2 years before Apple ever brought out the iPod. Now, it didn't have the user interface. It didn't have the ability to have 1,000 tunes on it. I think 100 was all you could do it. But Apple wasn't afraid of it. They knew what they wanted. They wanted to be able to put your entire library of the world on something that you could carry around with them. So just because it's out there doesn't mean that you can't go after and do it better and do it different. And so that's really, really interesting. I'd like to take questions from you, but I want to tell you a story about something that happened to me about 25 years ago. I was in Santa Monica, California. I had been pitching Disney for work, and that night, I love Santa Monica because there's always all these artists that work the streets, and they're doing things out there, and they're all entrepreneurs. They're all doing different kinds of artwork and selling it to people the best they can. And I stumbled into a guy that is in my world, and I'd never seen anything quite like it. he would take a lump of clay, and for $25, he would take and do your face for $25 in about 20 minutes. And I just sat back watching him all evening long. And I never talked to him, but I was just fascinated by it, because that's what my world was about, is sculpting heads to become animated characters that Disney or Universal or any of those people would use. And so I flew back the next morning, and I found out that we had just gotten an incredibly large job in Israel for an attraction that required 50 to 100 of these heads about the size of what this guy was doing, your fist. And I'm telling all the artists, I'm going, don't panic. I've got the perfect guy that we can hire. He's a street performer. He's an artist on the street. And they're going, no, don't bring him here. The quality won't be there. He won't be able to do those kinds of things. Well, I wouldn't listen to them. No, I didn't have a friend at the company. I just flew. They said, you won't even find him. He's somewhere else by now. And I went, baloney. I got on a plane that afternoon and flew back. I got there that night, and sure enough, he was on the street again doing the same thing. This time I went up to him and I said, hey, I want to make you an offer. And he goes, son, he's pointing to this little boy that's standing in the doorway. And I went, no, I want to talk to you. And he goes, no, son. So I went over and I said, are you his son? Is that your dad over there doing that? He goes, yeah. He doesn't speak English. And I went, oh. I said, well, I want to hire your dad for a couple months. I want to bring him to Bowling Green, Ohio, and have him do sculpting for me. And the little boy, he goes, I don't know. I said, well, where's your mom? And she goes, well, my mom and dad are divorced. I said, well, where do you live? And he goes, reluctantly, he said, we live in our car. He said, he's basically said, we just go from city to city. And I said, well, I want to bring you to Bowling Green, and I'll make it worth, I'll put you up, I'll get you a nice hotel, I'll feed you, I'll take care of all of those things. So it took 3 days for this conversation between this little boy who's 11 years old now, at that particular time. And he finally convinces his dad that they're going to drive to Bowling Green. And so we set up a date, and they agree through the little boy, they agree on what day they're going to do. And sure enough, they made a phone call that day that they left. And they said, we're on our way, but our car broke down. Would you send me $1,000? And so I'm thinking, oh, what have I got myself into? So I wired them $1,000, and they show up. And so I get them into one of those long stay places, a nice hotel that they can stay in. And I take them over and I show them where I work. Now, I just figured that the little boy will be with his dad. And so I said, tomorrow morning, I said, you'll go here. And he said, the little boy goes, no, I want to be with you. I went, no, you have to be with your dad. I said, that's the only way this can work. He goes, my dad will be all right. He doesn't speak English, but he understands. And he goes, oh, he understands. So the little boy comes with me and goes to the university. And he spends that day, and we go back. And the artists are already going, this guy doesn't understand what business we're in. He's an artist, but he doesn't really know what's going on. So this thing takes a complete turn for the worst. And in a couple of days, the artists go, he needs to go away. You need to send him away. And now I feel like crap, because I brought this little boy and his father all the way from California to Bowling Green. His dad's crying, the little boy's crying, I'm crying. We're all in this meeting, and it's a disaster. And so I figured the only way out of this is to give them money. And I figured he was going to be with me for 2 months, $10,000. So I go to the bank, and I get $10,000, and we meet again. And this time I get out the money and I put it on the table, and I go, look, I'll pay you for everything that you had, the room, board, everything. And I said, you need to move on. And they both when they saw the money, realized this was going to be all right. And I said, well, where are you going to go? And they go, we're going to go to New York. And I go, oh, don't go to New York. Winter's coming. I said, go back out west where you can do, your street performing. So they left. And I felt terrible about what I had done. I brought these guys. So time goes by, 10 years go by, and I get an email from this little boy, and his name's Frank Wu. And Frank said, Gene, he said, my dad and I always were really thoughtful of you because of what you did. And I'm thinking, oh, what's this going to be about? He goes, you really were fair to us. My dad couldn't do it. He said, and I just want you to know that I'm now he would be 21 years old. I'm now at the College of Art and Design in Detroit, Michigan, the one General Motors runs. And I'm going, how did this little boy manage to get himself into one of the toughest schools in the world? But he said, I just had passion for art like my dad. So I was always, the reason why I wanted to be with you is I saw that you loved cars and I loved cars, and I wanted to be an automobile designer. And I'm going, oh, this is crazy. This is absolutely incredible. So I wrote him back and I said, that's unbelievable. I'm so proud of you that you got yourself into a university like that. Well, 2 years ago, I get a LinkedIn message from him. And he said, I just wanted to let you know that I'm the head designer of the Cadillac division of General Motors now. And any automobile that you see now that Cadillac is putting out, Frank Wu designed. He's no longer there now. He's over in China designing electric cars for China. But I tell this story because he wanted it more than anything in the world. And I think one of the things that drives entrepreneurs is this word called passion, this word. And if you don't have passion for what you're doing, you have a weak chance of making it to Broadway. It's the link that takes the entrepreneur from the wannabe entrepreneurs. There's so many people that want it, but the passion isn't there. And that passion was what I saw in Frank Wu, that was the most amazing phenomena that I've ever seen in my entire life. And, the one thing I want you to be aware of is that if you're not around the right people, the worst things that can happen to you is that people will say, you can't do that. That's the worst thing that you can hear from people. If you're surrounded by people that have that you can't do it thing, dump them. Don't be around them. In fact, one of the first things my mentor said to me when I got the one at the university was, if you want to be a university prof, and I did when I got there, that became my passion. He said, you got to get rid of all these kids that don't know what they're doing, because you're going to be the average of the 5 people you run around with. And I want you to run around with me. I want you to be around me. And that's what you're looking for, is entrepreneurs and mentors that will allow you to be involved in their life. Because if they're involved in your life, they'll take you places that you never dreamed that you could ever get to. And so with that notion, what do you want from me? What can I do for you?
So if any of our participants have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we can relay them on to Dr. Poor, or just unmute your mic and ask.
Did you throw it back at me again, or am I? We're waiting.
No, we'll see if we have questions, and I can start off with a question, and this isn't related to the story you just said, but how do you stand out as an entrepreneur in a saturated market? I think of Toledo as a very creative community. You have very strong assets, from photographers to videographers to artists. How do you stand out as an entrepreneur in a saturated market?
How do you stand out? it goes back to that whole notion of how do you become famous? Differentiation is it's so important in this whole movement of being an entrepreneur. If you look at the qualities of creativity and you look at the qualities of entrepreneur, they're the same. They're of thinking differently. I think that you can't be, you need to separate yourself from the pack, and you have to look at what is it about you that makes you unique. And one of the things that I ask kids to do in my class is to create a bucket list. And the bucket list starts to form about who do you want to meet? Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? What are the things that you want to accomplish? And it was my mentor at the university at Kent when I was just a student that made me do that when I was 19 years old. He just said, what are the things that you want to accomplish to do it? Well, that right away separates you, once you get some notion of where you want to go with your life, you start separating yourself from all those people who are still trying to find themselves. There's an energy that will start to form within you when you start thinking about what it is that you want to try to do with your life. And that it's the way you carry yourself. It's the way, one of the reasons why I want you to watch Shark Tank is that you start learning about the vocabulary of an entrepreneur. When you start having a mentor in your life, an adult that is doing what you want to do and can help you, you start acting differently than you do if you're running around with people your age. And that was such a change for me to have people who opened doors for me, took me to conferences, opened doors for me that I didn't even know existed. It's a way of packaging yourself. It's so important that you differentiate who you are from everybody else. I mean, and it's so hard for kids to understand that because they want to fit in. They want, there's this whole, when I'm in front of kids, they'll say, the ones that want to talk about it, they'll go, you're right. We do. We don't want to be different. We want to dress the right way. We want to go to the right places. We want to make sure that and the problem with that is that they're clueless about what your dream is, and what other people think about your dream is none of your business, because most people don't have one. And especially at your age, and what happens is that you can become creative and you can position yourself in the marketplace by just being on the track of being and getting where you want to go. I think it's being different. And at this point in your life, most kids can't do it. Their whole environment that they live in is one of fitting in. You want to fit in, fear of missing out, and if you look at, that's why heroes were so important to me. Steve Jobs did not care what anybody thought about him. he was more focused on what he wanted to become. And I think I've never lost my energy level as I've gotten older about where I want to go, what I want to do, and how I want to do it. I just think so differently than all the people that are spectators to my life. You know, the 5 people that are in my life right now are all smarter than me. And I do that on purpose so that I can learn, so that I can grow. I'm not done. You're at the beginning of your life. I'm at the end of my life, but I still want to put a dent in the universe. I still want to make a contribution. I still want to do things very differently. I don't want to be normal. There's nothing about normal that looks like fun to me. I want to be weird. I don't want to be that typical university professor. I wanted everything in my life. I wanted to be different, everything. And that's how I stood out, is by being different, by being unique. I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It does. It does, and that's a very unique perspective. And I enjoyed how you mentioned you surround yourself with people that you want to be, smart people who have many perspectives that we might not always have. We have one question from Madison, one of our participants, and she asked, "What was one of the biggest mistakes you've made?"
Biggest mistake?
Yes.
Oh God. Oh man. Well, the restaurant was a disaster. I mean, I knew the night that I opened the doors that I had made a big, big mistake. But I had one. I always use this one in class because they keep, give us more, tell us more how you went out there and died. I was one of my gigs was I started consulting for companies on creativity. And I probably did a couple hundred companies. I did a lot of consulting. It was one of my mentors, I found a new mentor and he was doing a lot of consulting and he wanted a partner. And I went, well, yeah, that looks like fun. I can grow, I can do things. Well, I was consulting for this one company and they said, hey, there's this guy giving a presentation about time management. And we think you should go to it because you've got so many things going on in your life and we'd like you to go to it for us. And so, you're paying for it, I'll go. It was $300. The guy was 4-hour presentation. So I go to it and I walk into this room and there's got to be like 300 people there. And I'm going, wow, 300 times 300, $90,000. This guy's making $90,000 in 4 hours. I want to try that. So what do I know? What do I know that other people don't know? Well, I know how to build houses. I know how to contract houses. One of my gigs was, I built probably 25 houses in Bowling Green, all of them very different, very unique. And so I thought I could do that. But what do I know? What do I know? Okay, know that. I know how to maximize the college experience. And parents will want to know, how will a student maximize the college experience? And how one of my notions is find a prof on campus that you can identify with and let them become a mentor. And so I thought, I'll do this seminar. I'll rent the French Quarters up in Toledo. I'll put full page ads in the newspaper. I'll call it Maximizing the University Experience, blah, 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 for your student. You're spending all this money on it. How can a kid get the best experience out of it? And so I hired 3 or 4 kids. I formed an LLC. I did all of the things. I spent probably 10 grand on this. Uh, I had notebooks made. I did all of it. And how many people do you think showed up? None, zero. And I can remember driving up to it that night and seeing the marquee in front of the French Quarter. It's no longer there. It's in Petersburg, and it used to be there. And maximizing the college experience with Dr. Gene Poor. And I'm thinking, wow, there's going to be hundreds of people there. I didn't overprice it. I made it like $50. I thought, and there was this whole room and nobody showed, not one person. So I had to learn, what did I do wrong? And so I tracked down the guy that did the one on time management, and he was in Cleveland. And I went up and I did it again. And after it was over with, one of my things that I always tell people is I always want to know what's going on here. I want to know behind the scenes. I want to go backstage. I want to understand what's going on. And so I caught this guy and I said, "Can I have 5 minutes of your time?" And he said, "Sure." And I said, "Here's what I did." And he said, he just smiled and he said, you have to understand something. He said, you said 300 people times 300, I made $90,000. What you missed was I spent $80,000 getting those 300 people there. I had television ads, magazines, direct mail. All you did was a couple newspaper ads, and that was it. He goes, so I had to spend $80,000 to make $10,000. But he said, that's how it's done. That's the way that my business works. It has a lot of front end loading to get the people there. And he said, I could have had 400 people or 500 people, but I got 300. And he said, I sometimes want to increase my amount of, but I'm thinking, okay, I might be at the sweet spot. This is as good as it's going to get. So I came back and I did it again, and I did more advertising, and I ended up consulting for a company up in Blissfield, Michigan called Timber Frame Homes. And they paid me a day rate, and they took care of all the advertising and took care of all the food and all of the stuff. All I had to do is show up and do it. And then they'd give me like $2,500. And I thought, perfect. I don't have to do anything. There's no risk. They're going to pay me if nobody shows up. And so I learned a lot, but that was failure. Failure is a big part of this, but you got to try. I mean, if you don't try, you don't know, and so it's all an experiment. The whole ride is an experiment, and you're learning constantly. And gaining more and more information about what's going on in terms of how you're going to go about doing stuff like that. Does that help? But I could spend the rest of the afternoon. I joked earlier, we could go till noon tomorrow with mistakes that you make, but they're all learning. I mean, you're 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. The probability that you're going to live to be over 100 years old. You know that, right? Anybody ever told you that? The probability of you being born was incredible. The probability of you living to be over 100 is pretty well out there. The amount of knowledge that's being gained through artificial intelligence and medicine alone is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, my mom's 99 and still alive, and she was born in 22. You were born 15 years ago, 16 years, 17 years ago. The amount of information in terms of long, so your life expectancy is going to be way off the charts. And so learning is going to be a really good investment for you to make, because you're going to be doing it a long time. What else?
We're going to do one more question, and that will probably take us up till 1 o'clock, and then we can start transitioning into our students and participants working on kind of market analysis and customer discovery on their specific proposals. So Jack has that last question for us.
Yeah, and that ties in pretty well with the next topic, which is how did you know that your business is going to be successful? Like, you
You
have
never,
all these ideas and I've been doing all
yeah.
these things, but
Oh,
when did you know?
you don't know. I think the best thing you can do is try to beta test it. Somehow, try to beta test whatever your idea is, some little easy way. If you've got a product that you think that will sell, create some prototypes of it and try selling it. If you've got whatever it is, if you beta test it. The other thing, if somebody else is, let's say you want to, there's always somebody in my classroom that wants to do a hamburger place. I mean, with 300 kids in a classroom, there's always going to be somebody. You should go work in a hamburger place. If somebody else is doing what your idea is, but you have a better spin on it, go work for them and watch what they're doing. When I watched somebody do it to me, when I was building my restaurant, there was another guy in town in Bowling Green that was going to open up a restaurant the following year. He watched every move I made. He knew every mistake I was making. He knew all my strengths. He knew all my weaknesses. And when he hit the ground running, he's tough. He was really tough as a competitor. But beta testing is really, really important. I think, even if you don't become an entrepreneur, you should beta test whatever your dream is or whatever you think you're going to end up doing with a college degree. I give the example, I ask, because I started the visual communications program, I'll ask in my class, how many of you want to be a photographer? And, hands will go up, they want to be a photographer. I go, how many of you that want to be a photographer have a mentor right now, or even an acquaintance right now that is a photographer? And typically nobody. I mean, the majority of college students that have passed through my life that identified to me what they wanted to do with their life didn't even know anybody that did it. And for example, the photography industry is absolutely in a nosedive because everybody is a photographer now. Everybody is a videographer now. And you want to be a photographer in a world where everybody is a photographer, you're in big trouble. And that can be said for a lot of different areas. I think as a prof who's retired now, I think one of the cardinal sins that universities make is that they offer majors that there are absolutely no jobs available. And because the kids want the degrees, universities offer the degrees. And so beta test is the smaller the experiment. Can you sell it? Can you sell one? Can you sell 10? I mean, there are no guarantees, but the sooner that you can try something and try to be able to make it yours, that's the best chance you have is just to run the experiment early on, because it's gonna wash itself out one way or another. I didn't know if I could do robots, but I went after a different demographic than theme parks in the beginning. I went after trade shows. Nobody was selling animated anything at trade shows, and I knew I could sell in a trade show because I spent some time in that business. And you start small. I did it in my garage. Then I rented a small place. Now we've got 2 places, one in Cincinnati and one in Bowling Green. And I started with myself, and now there's 80 people working there. And so that help?
Absolutely.
Oh, you guys, this thing that you're experiencing up there, a group of people who are learning about this industry, is absolutely fascinating. You guys are incredible. That's the way, do something that you can put on your resume that will shock the daylights out of people. Because if you don't, you all look alike, and what you want to do is you want to stand out one way or another. You want me to give you a good line? I'll end with this. This would be the last line that I'm going to give you. I had a kid looking for a job, and he wanted it really bad, and he got an interview, and it was a sales job. He wanted to sell. He said, "I was born to sell, and I wanted to sell, but I haven't been able to get a job anywhere." And so he finally gets an interview, and the guy said, "I want you to write me a letter, and I want you to tell me why should I give you the job of a salesperson." So he comes over to my house, and he's got a 3-page letter. And I said, "I don't even want to read 3 pages." And he doesn't either. 1 page. Come on in the house, make it 1 page. So he writes 1 page. And I said, I read it and it wasn't bad. I said, "In the last paragraph, I want you to do 1 sentence. I want you to say, when do I start and where do I park?" And he goes, "Why?" And I said, "Because you demonstrated to him you knew how to close. And selling is about closing." And you ask him, "When do I start?" So you ask him for the job. And 2, you put a punctuation mark at the end of it going, "Well, where do I park?" And so if you get in a situation where you want the job, just tell them, ask them, "When do I start?" They don't know how to answer that. And every interview will always say to you, "Do you have any questions for me?" Ask the question, "When do I start? Where do I park?" I love all of you. You guys are amazing. Good luck. Have a good life. Have fun. Every day, have fun. And you will if it's your job. If it's your dream you're working on, you'll have fun. If you're working on somebody else's dream, that sucks. But other than that, have a good ride.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Dr. Poor. That was really 45 minutes of great information. You are a very engaging speaker, and we're grateful to have you in this session. Right now, students, if you go to your email or the Google Classroom page, and you will find 2 attached worksheets that we're going to start working on right now.
Okay.
And the first one is the one that looks at market research and customer discovery, and specifically with your business idea. And then the second worksheet is customer discovery, questions that you can ask your possible customers. So we're going to place you into breakout rooms right now, so you can work with your team or just kind of individually with many people in a group. And then we'll have Dr. Poor come visit the breakout rooms just to see if you guys have any questions or if he can provide any advice onto your business plan. So Jack will set up those breakout rooms now. I know Shalila and Janisa will be one group because I think they had an idea of they were working together. Then we can put everyone else in another group working as individuals, and we'll be around to answer any questions.
Okay. Jack, thanks so much for the opportunity.
No, thank you for attending. We really enjoyed it.
Okay. All right. This is my first Zoom, so this is